Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today we're exploring a seriously fascinating source text by an author named Zhu Feng titled Adding Value to Life. Have you ever noticed how quickly we judge a book by its cover in our everyday interactions? Well, what makes this text so captivating is the journey it takes us on, starting right exactly there. We begin with something we literally all deal with, how society judges us based on our appearances and our connections. And then we follow the author as the text takes a really sharp, unexpected turn into highly specific spiritual territory. It offers a fascinating look at how human psychology connects with spiritual ambition.
Here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be covering the power of packaging, the psychology of self-worth, elevating life's quality, and finally, the Lifechanyuan transformation.
Section 1. The Power of Packaging, How Society Assigns Value.
Shui Feng uses a really stark contrast to make his opening point. Just imagine moving to a new place. How do you think people would react if you showed up with a letter of introduction from the president's office? Everyone, probably even the governor, would likely show a lot of deference to you. But if that exact same letter is just from a local neighborhood office, well, you might not even get a meeting with the county chief. He uses another great example too. Imagine a photo in your living room of you standing next to Bill Gates versus a photo of you hanging out with a known criminal. The absolute crucial point here is that you, the actual person, haven't changed one single bit in either scenario. But this external packaging completely alters how society perceives your value. Suddenly, doors open and respect is given, simply because of association.
To really drive this home, Zhu Feng shares a great personal anecdote. He notes that whenever he traveled in China and a taxi driver asked where his child was studying, just casually mentioning a university in the United States would cause the driver's attitude and tone to noticeably shift. The author says it felt as if his own status and value had suddenly skyrocketed right there in the passenger seat. This allowed him to project a much more dignified demeanor. It's just a perfect everyday example of how effective self-presentation suddenly increases one's perceived status and dignity in the secular world.
Moving right along to Section 2, Psychology of Self-Worth. Moving from external to internal.
Now you might be looking at all this social maneuvering and asking the author's own rhetorical question. Is this superficial? Is it all just shallow posturing? Well, Zhu Feng firmly defends the practice. He says absolutely not. Why? Because the secular world actively thrives on it. Life is a game, he argues, so why not play it? But more importantly, he points out that truthful self-presentation doesn't just make you look good to other people. It has a profound psychological impact that subtly but incredibly powerfully increases your own internal self-worth. It literally changes how you view yourself.
To build on that internal feeling, the author lists his association with specific, highly regarded friends within his own circle, referring to them as Taiji Celestial, Fashan Celestial, Penglai Celestial, and Tianshan Celestial. He explains that every single time he thinks of these gem-like friends, he feels a massive surge of pride and sees himself as someone truly remarkable. So the argument here is that the packaging, in this case the high-value people you associate with, profoundly increases your internal sense of self-worth. It's not just some external trick you play on society, it actively fuels your own confidence.
Section 3. Elevating Life's Quality, the Metaphorical Journey.
Okay, so here is where the text takes a major pivot. We are moving away from everyday social networking and jumping into divine ambition. To set up this new concept of spiritual elevation, Zhu Feng points to revered religious figures across completely different traditions. He mentions St. Peter and St. Paul, as well as Guanyin Bodhisattva and Manjusri Bodhisattva. Now, why mention them? Because the author argues that these figures were actually quite ordinary in their raw form. But their lives gained massive, enduring value specifically because of their special, close relationships with Jesus and Shakyamuni. Their ultimate packaging, according to the text, was their association with the divine, which elevated their lives completely.
So what does this all mean? Well, the core idea is captured perfectly in the author's definition. When he talks about adding value to life in the ultimate sense, he is talking about going way beyond mere self-presentation or having fun in the secular world. It is about enhancing the fundamental quality and form of one's existence through spiritual refinement. So, we have fully transitioned from the idea of superficial packaging, like wearing a nice suit or bragging about a university, to profound, intrinsic spiritual transformation. It challenges us to ask, are we just dressing up our resumes, or are we fundamentally improving who we are?
Think about the raw materials in our world. An uncut gem, uncarved ivory, or even just a blank sheet of paper. These things have immense potential, right? But on their own, they don't really shine.
That uncut gem needs to be meticulously cut and polished. The ivory needs careful carving by an expert. And a blank sheet of paper really has little value until a master artist paints a beautiful landscape on it and adds meaningful inscriptions. Shuifeng is saying that our secular lives are exactly like these raw materials. They are just sitting there waiting for a master artist's touch to become genuinely valuable spiritual masterpieces.
Section 4. The Lifechanyuan Transformation, a specific spiritual ideology.
The author claims that specific, tangible transformations occur when people are exposed to his organization, Lifechanyuan. Shuifeng states that anyone who undergoes this spiritual transformation fundamentally changes their way of thinking, which essentially changes the very form of their life. The text provides some incredibly specific examples of this. A passionate political commentator suddenly loses interest in secular politics. An atheist begins to deeply question their old worldview. A strict religious devotee or even a staunch political party member reflects critically on their established beliefs. And a skeptic, doubtful about the future, suddenly finds real hope and anticipation. The author presents these dramatic worldview shifts as the ultimate proof of adding value to life.
And that brings us to a really central, empowering tenet of the text. If you believe you are valuable, you are. If you believe you are worthless, you are. The author's view is that you simply cannot be passive. One must become the active architect and builder of their own future life. By believing in your own worth and actively seizing opportunities to expand your knowledge, Shuifeng argues that a confident person can generate absolutely boundless spiritual strength and sudden emerging wisdom.
To boldly illustrate the danger of not taking those active steps towards spiritual refinement, Shuifeng shares a pretty vivid parable. Imagine a foolish man caught in a terrible flood. Step 1. He clings desperately to a precarious branch. Step 2. The greatest creator sends a rescue boat, but the man refuses to board. Step 3. A rescue plane is sent, and again he stubbornly refuses. Why? Because in Step 4 he is waiting for the greatest creator himself to come directly down and save him. The tragic, inevitable result is that he gets completely swept away by the flood. The author uses this to highlight the extreme danger of clinging to outdated practices, staying in a comfortable little bubble, and missing divine opportunities out of sheer stubbornness.
So the text sets up a very clear contrast here. On one side are people who spend their entire lives following a path that clearly leads nowhere. They close their eyes, they're afraid to try new paths, and they fear reading books with new ideas because it might completely shatter their fragile beliefs. On the other side is the courage to actually associate with great minds and embrace new thinking to find truth. Shuifeng asks a very pointed question. How can someone who doesn't even understand the concept of truth expect to find it without trying new ideas? He compares it to a blind man lighting a candle to no avail. You have to open your eyes to the light being offered.
Which brings us to the author's ultimate and honestly quite provocative question. Who wants to add value to their life? We are concluding this explainer impartially by looking at the author's final ultimatum. Shuifeng states that the metaphorical ship of life is right at your doorstep with Lifechanyuan. He boldly warns that if you still refuse to board this ship, you cannot blame the greatest creator, Jesus or Shakyamuni, for being unkind or unmerciful. It's a really powerful call to action that started all the way back with how we present ourselves to taxi drivers and ends with a demand for profound, worldview-shattering spiritual transformation. So, what do you make of this journey from the secular to the spiritual? I will leave you to ponder that provocative thought. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer today, and keep learning.